My daughter stood in my kitchen, her designer handbag sitting on my counter like it owned the place, and said the words that would change everything between us. "Mom, I need you to watch the twins every single day from 7 in the morning until 6 at night. Derek got promoted and I'm launching my consulting business, so we really need you to step up for family." No please. No asking if I had time. No acknowledgement that I'd already been watching her 3-year-old twins 3 days a week for the past year without a single thank you. Just an expectation that I would sacrifice my entire life, because she decided it was time for me to do so. I looked at my daughter, at this woman I'd raised to be strong and independent, and something inside me that had been bending for years finally snapped. "That's wonderful news about Derek's promotion," I said carefully, "and about your business. But I'm going to have to charge you my standard rate. $100 per hour per child." Madison's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, disbelief, and then something cold and hard that I'd never seen directed at me before. "You're joking." "I'm completely serious. You're going to charge your own daughter to watch your own grandchildren?" Her voice rose with each word. "Mom, that's insane. That's $200 an hour. 11 hours a day. That's over $400,000 a year." "Yes," I said, my hand surprisingly steady as I picked up my coffee cup. "That's what my time is worth." What happened next would unravel 32 years of motherhood and reveal truths about my family that I'd been deliberately ignoring for far too long. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Caroline Winters and I'm 56 years old. I raised 2 children mostly on my own after my husband Richard died of a heart attack when Madison was 12 and her brother James was 9. Richard had been a good man but a terrible planner, and he left us with a modest life insurance policy and a mortgage that took me 15 years to pay off. I worked as a nurse at St. Vincent's Hospital, pulling double shifts and weekend rotations to keep our heads above water. I missed school plays and soccer games and parent-teacher conferences because I was too busy keeping us fed and housed. But I told myself it was worth it. I was building a future for my children. I was teaching them the value of hard work and sacrifice. Madison had always been my difficult child. Brilliant, ambitious, and utterly convinced that the world owed her something. She'd gone to NYU on a partial scholarship that I'd supplemented by taking out loans I was still paying off. She'd graduated with honors, married Derek Walsh, a hedge fund manager she'd met at some networking event, and promptly gotten pregnant with twins. I'd been thrilled to become a grandmother. When Olivia and Emma were born, I'd taken a week off work to stay with Madison, cooking meals and changing diapers and walking the floors at night while she recovered. I thought we were building a bond, that motherhood might soften some of Madison's harder edges. Instead, it had simply given her new ways to make demands. It started small. Could I watch the twins for a few hours while she went to a doctor's appointment? Of course I could. Could I take them for an afternoon so she could have lunch with friends? Absolutely. Could I keep them overnight so she and Derek could have a date night? I was happy to help. But the requests grew and grew until I was watching them 3 full days a week, arriving at Madison's house in Westchester at 7 in the morning and leaving at 6 at night. 11 hours of chasing toddlers, changing diapers, preparing meals, doing laundry, cleaning up toys. All while Madison worked from her home office or met with clients or went to the gym. I never complained. After all, they were my grandchildren, and isn't this what grandmothers did? But standing in my kitchen that morning, looking at my daughter's expectant face, I realized I'd been waiting for something that was never going to come. Gratitude. Recognition. Some acknowledgement that what I was doing had value beyond being free childcare. Madison had never once said thank you. She'd never offered to pay me or even to cover the gas money for my twice-weekly drives from Brooklyn to Westchester. She'd simply assumed that my time, my energy, my entire life was available to her whenever she wanted it. The day before her demand, something had happened that changed everything. I'd been at her house watching the twins when Madison's friend Vanessa had stopped by. I'd met Vanessa before, another young mother from Madison's social circle with the kind of effortless wealth that came from family money and good marriages. I was in the playroom with Olivia and Emma, building a tower out of blocks, when I heard Madison and Vanessa talking in the kitchen. "I can't believe you're still using your mom as free babysitting." Vanessa's voice carried through the house. "Don't you feel guilty?" Madison laughed. Why would I feel guilty? She's retired now. It's not like she has anything better to do. But doesn't she want to travel? Have her own life? She worked so hard when you were growing up. My daughter's response made my blood run cold. Mom's idea of a good time is watching game shows and doing crossword puzzles. Trust me, she's happier being useful. Besides, if I was paying for full-time nanny care for twins, it would cost me over $100,000 a year. This way everybody wins. I'd sat there on the floor with my granddaughters, my hands frozen on a bright blue block, and felt something crack deep in my chest. I wasn't retired. I'd taken early retirement from the hospital 3 months ago, because Madison had convinced me that I needed to be available to help with the twins full-time. She'd made it sound like a gift, like I was being given the opportunity to spend precious time with my grandchildren that I'd never get back. I'd cashed out my retirement account early, taking a significant penalty, because Madison had assured me it was the right thing to do for family. And now I discovered that she'd been bragging to her friends about getting free childcare worth over $100,000 a year while dismissing my entire life as game shows and crossword puzzles. That night, I'd gone home to my small apartment in Brooklyn and done something I should have done years ago. I'd opened my laptop and started researching. What I found shocked me. Professional nanny care for twins in the New York area ranged from $50 to $75 per hour. Au pairs cost around $40,000 a year plus room and board. Even daycare centers charge $30,000 to $40,000 per child annually. Madison was saving at minimum $120,000 a year by using me as free labor. $120,000 that allowed her to maintain her expensive lifestyle, pursue her business dreams, and still have time for gym sessions and lunch dates with friends. Meanwhile, I was living on a fixed income in a one-bedroom apartment, having given up my career and financial security because my daughter had convinced me it was my duty as a grandmother. I'd spent that entire night doing calculations. If I'd stayed at the hospital for another 7 years until full retirement, I would have earned approximately $450,000 more in salary, plus my retirement benefits would have been significantly higher. I'd given all of that up because Madison had made me feel like a bad grandmother for even considering my own needs. The next morning, I'd driven to Westchester as usual, arriving at 7 to find Madison already dressed for what she called a breakfast meeting with potential clients. As she'd grabbed her car keys and designer bag, she'd casually mentioned that she and Derek had been talking, and they'd decided I should start watching the twins 5 days a week instead of 3. Full-time. Every weekday. 55 hours a week. That's when I'd said no for the first time in my life to my daughter. I told her we needed to talk about compensation. And that's when she'd laughed at me and said I should be grateful for the opportunity to spend time with my grandchildren, that most grandmothers would do anything for this kind of access. Standing in my kitchen the next day, watching Madison's face turn red with indignation at my $100 per hour rate, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Absolute clarity. You don't actually want to pay me what my time is worth. I said it as a statement, not a question. Of course not. Madison's voice was sharp. You're my mother. Family doesn't charge family for help. I took a deep breath. Then you'll need to find other childcare arrangements. Madison stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. What? I'm not available to watch the twins anymore. You'll need to hire a nanny or find a daycare. Mom, that's insane. What are you going to do? Sit home alone? Actually, I said, feeling stronger with each word, I'm going back to work. St. Vincent's has been asking me to come back part-time for months. I'm also going to take that watercolor class I've been putting off. And I'm booking that trip to Italy that I've been dreaming about since your father died. Madison's face had gone from red to white. You're being selfish. This is what you said that day in the playroom, isn't it? That I have nothing better to do than be your free babysitter? That my idea of a good time is game shows and crossword puzzles? Her mouth opened and closed. You were listening to a private conversation. You were having a private conversation about me in your own house while I was providing free labor. There's a difference. Madison grabbed her bag and headed for the door. Fine. Be selfish. But don't come crying to me when you're lonely and the twins don't even remember who you are. She slammed the door hard enough to rattle the windows. I stood in my kitchen, my coffee cold in my cup, and waited for the guilt to come. It didn't. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Free. What Madison didn't know, what nobody in my family knew, was that I'd been planning this moment for the past 3 months. Ever since that conversation with Vanessa, I'd been documenting everything. Every hour I spent at Madison's house, every meal I prepared, every diaper I changed, every load of laundry I folded. I'd been keeping meticulous records in a small notebook that I kept in my purse. I'd also been doing research into grandparents' rights, elder financial abuse, and the legal obligations adult children had toward their aging parents. What I discovered had shocked me to my core. I called my son James that afternoon. Unlike Madison, James lived modestly in New Jersey with his wife Teresa and their 5-year-old son Marcus. James was a high school teacher, Teresa was a nurse like I'd been, and they struggled financially but never asked me for help. "Hey Mom." James sounded happy to hear from me. "What's up? I need to tell you something and I need you to listen without interrupting."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
"Okay." James's voice shifted to concern. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine. Better than fine. But I need you to know what's been happening with your sister." I told him everything. The 3 days a week that had become an expectation. The early retirement I'd taken at Madison's insistence. The overheard conversation about free babysitting. Madison's demand for full-time care. And my decision to start charging or walk away. When I finished, there was a long silence. "James," I prompted. "Are you there?" "I'm here." His voice was tight with anger. "I'm just trying not to drive to Westchester right now and tell Madison exactly what I think of her. You knew she was taking advantage of me? Mom, we've all known for years. Madison has been using you since Dad died. She used you to pay for college. She used you to plan her wedding. She used you to furnish her first apartment. She takes and never gives anything back. Why didn't you say something? Because you taught us not to interfere with each other's relationships with you. Because every time I tried to bring it up, you defended her and said she was just going through a hard time. Because you're our mother and we assumed you knew what you were doing." Tears stung my eyes. "I didn't know. I thought I was being a good mother." "You were being a good mother," James said firmly. "Too good. Madison has been taking advantage of your generosity for decades. I'm proud of you for finally setting boundaries." "There's something else," I said. "Something I need to tell you about my finances." "What about your finances?" "I cashed out my retirement early to be available for Madison full-time. I took a 30% penalty." James was quiet for a long moment. "How much?" "About $90,000 in penalties and lost benefits." Another silence, longer this time. "Mom, that's financial elder abuse." "No, it's not. Madison didn't force me to do anything. She manipulated you into making a decision that benefited her at enormous cost to you. That's the definition of financial exploitation." I hadn't thought of it that way. But hearing James say it out loud, I realized he was right. Madison had systematically convinced me to give up my income, my career, and my financial security for her benefit. And she'd done it so skillfully that I believed I was making my own choices. "James, I need to ask you something." "Anything." "If I'd stayed working at the hospital, would you and Teresa have been upset? Would you have thought I was a bad grandmother?" "Mom, are you kidding? We're thrilled when you can visit Marcus once a month. We've never expected you to upend your whole life to provide childcare." "That's insane." "But Madison said that's what grandmothers do." "Madison says a lot of things. Most of them are designed to get what she wants." After I hung up with James, I sat down with my financial records and did something I should have done 3 months ago. I calculated exactly how much Madison's demands had cost me. Early retirement penalty $90,000. Lost wages from leaving work 3 months early. Approximately $35,000. Gas money driving to Westchester 3 times a week for a year, roughly $6,000. Value of childcare provided over the past year based on professional nanny rates, approximately $140,000. Total financial impact, $271,000. $251,000 that my daughter had extracted from me, while telling her friends I had nothing better to do than watch game shows. I opened a new document on my computer and began typing. Madison had asked me to step up for family. It was time to show her what that really meant. But I wasn't going to confront her yet. I'd learned something from watching my daughter operate all these years. The person with the most information wins. And I was just getting started gathering information. 3 days after I told Madison I wouldn't provide free childcare, she called me at 11 at night. I was already in bed, reading a novel I'd been trying to finish for 6 months, when my phone lit up with her name. Mom, I need your help. Her voice was tight with stress. What's wrong? Are the twins okay? They're fine, but I have a major client meeting tomorrow morning at 8, and the nanny service can't send anyone on short notice. Derek has an early flight to London. I need you to come watch them. I felt the old instinct to say yes, to drop everything and rescue her. Instead, I heard myself say something I'd never said before. No, Madison. I told you I'm not available for childcare anymore. But this is an emergency. Then you'll need to handle it the way any other parent would. Cancel your meeting or take the twins with you. I can't take them with me. Then cancel. My rate hasn't changed. $100 per hour per child. There was a stunned silence. You're really going to make me pay? Yes. Mom, this meeting could land me a $50,000 contract. Then you can certainly afford $400 for 2 hours of childcare. We're family. Family helps each other. Madison, I've been helping you for a year without any compensation or even acknowledgement. Now I'm setting boundaries. If you want my help, these are my terms. She hung up without another word. I lay in the dark, my heart pounding, waiting for the guilt to overwhelm me. Instead, I felt something that might have been pride. The next morning, I got a text from Madison. Fine. $200. Cash. But this is the last time. I smiled and texted back. Agreed. This is the last time. When I arrived at Madison's house, she practically threw the cash at me without making eye contact. I'll be back by 10, she said coldly. Take your time, I replied calmly. It's your money. After she left, I spent 2 hours playing with Olivia and Emma, my sweet granddaughters who had no idea their mother and grandmother were locked in a battle of wills that would reshape our entire family. But while they napped, I did something Madison would never have expected. I went through her home office. I wasn't snooping randomly. I knew exactly what I was looking for. Madison had always been careless about leaving important documents lying around, confident that no one in her life would ever question her or challenge her narrative. On her desk, I found her business plan for her consulting company. The projected income was impressive, over $300,000 in the first year. But what caught my attention was a section labeled Startup Costs and Operational Expenses. Under the expense column, she'd listed childcare $0 annually thanks to family support. My daughter had built her entire business model around the assumption that I would provide unlimited free labor. She'd quite literally calculated my unpaid work into her profit margins. I photographed the business plan with my phone. Then I kept looking. In a filing cabinet, I found something even more interesting. Tax returns for the past 3 years. Madison and Derek's combined income was over $600,000 annually. They were wealthy by any reasonable standard. Yet somehow they claimed me as a dependent on their taxes for the past 2 years. I stared at the forms, feeling my hands start to shake. They claimed me as a dependent, which meant they'd gotten a tax break for supporting me, while I was the one providing them with over $100,000 worth of free services annually. I photographed those too. I was just closing the filing cabinet when I heard Olivia stirring from her nap. I went back to being the doting grandmother, but my mind was racing. Madison had not just taken advantage of my generosity. She'd systematically exploited me for financial gain while portraying herself as my caretaker to the IRS. When Madison returned, she barely acknowledged me. Just left the money on the counter and started talking to the twins about their morning. I picked up the cash and headed for the door. Madison, I said quietly. Yes, you claimed me as a dependent on your taxes. Her face went carefully blank. So you got a tax break for supporting me while I was providing you with free childcare worth over $100,000 a year. That seems like fraud. Her expression hardened. You're not seriously threatening me. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm just making an observation. Mom, I think you should leave. I'm going to. But Madison, you should know something. I've been documenting everything. Every hour of childcare. Every expense. Everything. And I've been doing research into elder financial abuse and tax fraud. Why would you do that? Because I'm not the naive old woman you think I am. Because I spent 30 years as a nurse dealing with families who exploited their aging parents. And because I deserve better from my own daughter. I left her standing in her kitchen, her face pale with shock or anger. I couldn't tell which, and I didn't care. That evening, I met with someone I'd been referred to through a friend from the hospital. Her name was Patricia Moreno, and she was an attorney who specialized in elder law and family financial disputes. Mrs. Winters, Patricia said as we sat in her office overlooking the Brooklyn Bridge. Tell me everything. I told her about Madison's demands, about the early retirement I'd been manipulated into, about the tax fraud, about the business plan that calculated my unpaid labor into her profit margins. Patricia listened with the focused attention of someone who'd heard similar stories before. How old are you? 56. And your daughter claimed you as a dependent? Yes, for the past 2 years. Mrs. Winters, your daughter has committed tax fraud. You're not a dependent. You have your own income from your pension and Social Security. The fact that she claimed you while you were providing her with substantial unpaid services is particularly egregious. What can I do about it? Several things. First, you can report the tax fraud to the IRS. Second, you can sue her for the fair market value of the services you provided. Third, you can file for grandparents' rights if she tries to cut off your access to the twins in retaliation. But Patricia leaned forward, her expression serious. Before you do any of that, I need to ask you something. What do you really want here? I thought about it. What did I want? To punish Madison? To get my money back? To teach her a lesson? I want my daughter to understand that what she did was wrong, I said finally. I want her to acknowledge that she exploited me. And I want to make sure she never does this to anyone else. Patricia nodded. Then let me suggest a different approach. Let me write a letter on your behalf detailing everything you've documented, including the tax fraud. We'll give Madison a choice. She can either agree to repay you for the fair market value of 1 year of childcare, file amended tax returns removing you as a dependent, and agree to never claim you as a dependent again, or we'll report her to the IRS and file a civil suit for elder financial abuse. She'll cooperate? Patricia smiled grimly. People usually cooperate when they realize the alternative is a federal tax investigation and potential criminal charges. 2 days later, Madison showed up at my apartment unannounced. Her face was red and blotchy, and she was clutching a letter from Patricia's office. How could you do this to me? She demanded before I'd even fully opened the door. You're going to ruin my life over babysitting? Come in, Madison, I said quietly. We need to talk. She stormed into my small living room, waving the letter. $140,000? You're demanding $140,000? That's the fair market value of the childcare I provided for 1 year. You can verify it with any nanny agency in New York. This is extortion. This is accountability. Madison, you claimed me as a dependent on your taxes while I was providing you with free services worth over 6 figures. That's fraud. I didn't know that was wrong. Derek's accountant suggested it. Then Derek's accountant gave you bad advice, and you're still responsible for the consequences. Madison collapsed onto my couch, and for the first time since she'd arrived, I saw something other than anger in her face. I saw fear. Mom, I don't have $140,000. Yes, you do. You and Derek make over $600,000 a year. You're crying poverty while driving a Mercedes and living in a house worth $2 million. But we have expenses, a mortgage, private school for the twins when they're older, retirement savings. Exactly. You have all the normal expenses that every parent has. But you tried to eliminate one of the biggest expenses, childcare, by manipulating your mother into providing free labor. Tears started running down Madison's face, and I felt the old instinct to comfort her, to tell her it was okay to let it go. But I forced myself to sit still and wait. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said finally. I just thought that's what grandmothers did. Grandmothers who choose to provide childcare out of love and generosity, yes. But grandmothers who are manipulated into early retirement and then exploited for free labor while being claimed as dependents on taxes? No, Madison. That's not what grandmothers do. That's what victims do. I'm not a victim. Not anymore. We sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Madison looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. What do you want, Mom? Really? I want you to take responsibility for what you've done. I want you to understand that I'm a person with my own life and my own dreams, not just a resource for you to exploit. And I want you to pay me back for the year of childcare I provided. Madison wiped her eyes. If I do that, if I pay you the $140,000 and file amended tax returns, will you drop this? I'll drop the legal action. But Madison, our relationship can't go back to what it was. Why not? Because what it was hurt me. And I won't let anyone hurt me like that again. Not even my own daughter. She looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. When did you become so strong? I've always been strong. I raised 2 children alone after your father died. I worked double shifts for 15 years. I put you through college. I was always strong, Madison. You just never noticed because my strength was always in service of you. Madison left an hour later with an agreement to pay me back in monthly installments over 2 years, and to file amended tax returns. She also agreed to family therapy, which Patricia had suggested as a condition of settlement. But as I closed the door behind her, I realized something profound. I didn't feel victorious. I felt sad. Sad that it had taken a legal threat to get my daughter to see me as a person. Sad that our relationship had been so one-sided for so long that she genuinely believed her exploitation was normal. Sad that I'd allowed it to happen because I'd confused being a good mother with being endlessly available for abuse. My phone rang. It was James. I heard Madison's car leave. How did it go? She's going to pay me back and file amended tax returns. That's good, right? I sat down heavily on my couch. I guess. But James, I think I broke something between us that can't be fixed. Maybe it needed to be broken, he said gently. Maybe the relationship you had with Madison was never healthy to begin with. Maybe. I looked around my small apartment, at the life I'd built on my own after Richard died, at the independence I'd fought so hard for, and then given away so easily. James, can I ask you something? Always. When Marcus gets older, if I want to spend time with him, will you let me? Mom, James's voice was thick with emotion. You can spend time with Marcus whenever you want. You never had to earn our love. We just love you. I started crying then, the tears I'd been holding back for months finally breaking free. That's the difference between my children. James loved me freely. Madison loved me conditionally. And I'd spent so much energy trying to earn Madison's love that I'd taken James's for granted. After I hung up, I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window watching the sun set over Brooklyn. Tomorrow I would call St. Vincent's and ask about that part-time position. Next week I would sign up for the watercolor class. Next month I would book my trip to Italy. For the first time in 30 years my life was my own. And if that meant my relationship with Madison was forever changed, then perhaps that was a price worth paying for my freedom. The next morning, Madison's first payment arrived via wire transfer. $2,333, the first of 60 monthly installments. I stared at the notification on my phone and felt something shift inside me. This wasn't about the money anymore. It was about reclaiming my worth. I called St. Vincent's. By noon, I had a part-time position in the pediatric unit, 3 12-hour shifts a week. The pay was good, the hours were flexible, and most importantly, it was mine. My choice. My life. When I called James to tell him, he actually cheered. Mom, I'm so proud of you. Thanks, honey. Hey, is Marcus available next Saturday? I thought maybe I could take him to the Natural History Museum. He would love that. And Mom? Yeah, this is who you were always meant to be. Someone who makes choices for herself. Not just for everyone else. After we hung up, I sat with those words. Maybe James was right. Maybe I'd spent so many years being who everyone else needed me to be that I'd forgotten who I actually was. It was time to find out. And if Madison couldn't accept this version of me, the version who had boundaries and self-respect and her own dreams, then perhaps our relationship would have to be redefined or maybe even released. Either way, I was finally free. And that freedom was worth more than any amount of money Madison could ever pay me back. The therapy session started 3 weeks after Madison agreed to the settlement. Our therapist was Dr. Helen Kravitz, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and eyes that seemed to see through every carefully constructed excuse and rationalization. She worked out of a brownstone office in Park Slope, and the first time Madison and I sat across from each other in her comfortable chairs, the silence was so thick I could barely breathe. Dr. Kravitz began simply, "Tell me why you're here." Madison looked at me, then at the floor. "My mother thinks I took advantage of her." I stayed quiet, letting Madison's words hang in the air. Dr. Kravitz turned to me. Is that accurate, Caroline? It's part of it, I said carefully. But the bigger issue is that Madison and I have never had a relationship where she saw me as a complete person. I've always been a function for her. A provider, a caretaker, a resource. Never just a mother who also has her own needs and dreams. Madison's head snapped up. That's not fair. Isn't it? I kept my voice steady. Madison, when was the last time you asked me about my life? About what I wanted? About my interests or goals or feelings? She opened her mouth, then closed it. The silence stretched out. Dr. Kravitz made a note on her pad. Let's start at the beginning. Caroline, tell me about your relationship with Madison when she was growing up. I took a deep breath and began talking about those years after Richard died. About working double shifts while Madison was in middle school and high school. About missing her school events and milestones because I had to keep us housed and fed. About the guilt I carried for not being present enough, for not being the kind of mother who could volunteer for field trips or host elaborate birthday parties. I thought if I could just get her through college, I said, my voice cracking slightly, then I'd have succeeded. Then all the sacrifice would have been worth it. Dr. Kravitz leaned forward. And did Madison know about these sacrifices? I told her, I said defensively. She knew I was working hard. Knowing someone is working hard is different from understanding the cost, Dr. Kravitz said gently. Madison, did you understand what your mother was giving up? Madison shifted uncomfortably. I knew she worked a lot. But I thought that was just what single parents did. All my friends with single moms had the same situation. Did your friends' mothers take out loans to send them to expensive private universities? Madison's face flushed. I had scholarships. That covered 60% of tuition. I covered the rest. Plus room and board. Plus your expenses. I graduated with over $80,000 in parent loans. I didn't know it was that much. As I never told you. I wanted you to focus on your education, not worry about money. But Madison, those loans? I'm still paying them off. I'll be paying them until I'm 62 years old. The color drained from Madison's face. You never said anything. Because I thought that's what good mothers did. They sacrificed silently. But what I've realized is that silent sacrifice doesn't teach anything. It just creates an expectation that one person's needs always come before another's. Over the following weeks, therapy sessions became an excavation of our entire relationship. We talked about Madison's college years, when I'd sent her money for textbooks and emergencies while eating ramen for dinner myself. We talked about her wedding, which I'd helped pay for despite having no savings at the time. We talked about every time Madison had asked for help and I'd said yes automatically, without ever considering whether I actually had the capacity to give what she was asking. But the real breakthrough came in our fifth session, when Dr. Kravitz asked Madison a question that seemed to unlock something neither of us had acknowledged. Madison, when you were planning to expand your childcare needs to 5 days a week, did you consider how that would impact your mother's life? Madison hesitated. I thought she'd be happy to spend more time with the twins. But did you ask her if she'd be happy? Or did you just assume? The silence that followed was devastating. I assumed, Madison finally whispered. I assumed because that's what I've always done. I've always assumed Mom would say yes. That she'd be available. That she'd want to help me. Why do you think you made those assumptions? Madison was quiet for so long I thought she might not answer. Finally, she said something that made my heart break. Because she's my mother. That's what mothers do. They're always there. They always help. They always say yes. Dr. Kravitz looked at me. Caroline, how does it make you feel to hear that? I felt tears burning in my eyes. It makes me feel invisible. Like I don't exist as anything other than Madison's mother. Like Caroline, the person who loves painting and traveling and reading mystery novels doesn't matter. Only Mom matters, and Mom's only purpose is to serve Madison. Madison was crying now too. I didn't mean to make you feel that way. But you did. And the thing is, Madison, I let you. I taught you that my needs didn't matter by never expressing them. I taught you that you could take from me endlessly by never setting boundaries. This isn't all your fault. I'm responsible too. Dr. Kravitz handed us both tissues. This is important. You're both acknowledging your roles in this dynamic. Caroline, you're recognizing that your pattern of silent martyrdom created an environment where Madison learned to take without considering the cost. Madison, you're recognizing that you never questioned that pattern or considered your mother as a whole person with her own needs. Now the question is, can you build something different? I don't know, I said honestly. I don't know if we can. Madison looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Something that might have been genuine fear. Do you want to try? I thought about it. Did I want to try? Part of me was so angry, so hurt by decades of being taken for granted, that I wanted to walk away and never look back. But another part of me, the part that remembered holding baby Madison in my arms and promising to always protect her, wasn't ready to give up completely. I want to try, I said finally. But Madison, things have to be different. Fundamentally different. I can't go back to being the mother who always says yes, who always prioritizes your needs over my own. That version of our relationship almost destroyed me. I don't want that version either, Madison said. And I was surprised to hear that she sounded genuine. Mom, I didn't realize how much I was hurting you. I really didn't. But now that I know, now that I see it, I can't unknow it. And I don't want to be the person who exploits her own mother. Words are easy, I said quietly. Actions are harder. I know. So let me show you. Let me prove to you that I can be different. We left that session with something fragile and new between us. Not trust exactly, but maybe the possibility of trust someday. Meanwhile, my own life was beginning to bloom in ways I'd never expected. The part-time position at St. Vincent's turned out to be exactly what I needed. Working in pediatrics again reminded me why I'd become a nurse in the first place. The children, the families, the small miracles that happened every day. It fed something in my soul that had been starving for years. My coworkers welcomed me back like I'd never left. Maria, one of my closest friends from before my retirement, hugged me so hard I couldn't breathe. We thought we'd lost you to grandma life, she said, laughing. I'm so glad you came back. I almost didn't, I admitted. I almost let my daughter convince me that being a grandmother was the only role I had left to play. Maria shook her head. Girl, you're 56 years old. You've got at least 20 more good years of work in you if you want them. Maybe 30. Don't let anyone tell you your life is over just because you have grandchildren. Those words stayed with me. 20 or 30 more years. An entire lifetime ahead of me if I chose to claim it. I signed up for the watercolor class at the community center in Park Slope. The instructor was a retired art teacher named Bernard, who had infinite patience for beginners like me, who could barely paint a straight line. But there was something magical about putting brush to paper, about watching colors blend and flow, and create something that existed only because I'd imagined it. At our third class, Bernard stopped by my easel and studied my painting. It was supposed to be a landscape, but it looked more like abstract chaos. You're trying too hard to control it, he said gently. Watercolor requires you to let go a little. To trust the process. To accept that sometimes the paint will do what it wants, not what you want. I stared at my messy painting and felt like he was talking about more than just art. The other people in the class became my friends. There was Ruth, a widow in her 70s who painted with bold, fearless strokes. There was Michael, a young man in his 30s who was recovering from a nervous breakdown and found peace in the gentle rhythm of painting. There was Diane, a woman my age who just left a 30-year marriage and was rebuilding her life one watercolor at a time. We started meeting for coffee after class, sharing our paintings and our stories. When I told them about Madison and the babysitting conflict, they listened without judgment. My daughter tried the same thing, Diane said. Wanted me to watch her kids 5 days a week while she pursued her career. I said no from the beginning. She was mad for a while, but she got over it. Now she pays for daycare and we have a much better relationship because it's not built on resentment. Ruth nodded. My son used to treat me like a bank. Always asking for money, never paying it back. Finally I told him the bank was closed. He stopped talking to me for 2 years. But when he came back it was different. He came back as an adult who respected me, not as a child who expected me to solve all his problems. Their stories gave me hope that maybe Madison and I could find our way to something healthier. I booked my trip to Italy for September. 3 weeks traveling through Tuscany, staying in small villages, visiting museums and vineyards, painting the landscapes that had inspired artists for centuries. The trip cost $8,000, money I would have once felt guilty spending on myself. But now it felt like an investment in the life I was finally claiming. When I told James about the trip, he was thrilled. Mom, that's amazing. You deserve this. Are you going alone? I am. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. Your mother, traveling alone through Italy at 56. Who would have thought? I would have, James said warmly. You've always been braver than you gave yourself credit for. Madison's reaction was more complicated. When I mentioned the trip during one of our therapy sessions, her face went through several expressions. Surprise, something that might have been envy, and then something that looked almost like respect. 3 weeks in Italy, she said slowly. That sounds incredible. Doesn't it? I felt a small smile forming. I'm terrified and excited in equal measure. Dr. Kravitz intervened gently. Madison, how does it make you feel that your mother is taking this trip? Madison was quiet for a moment. Honestly, a little jealous. Derek and I haven't had a real vacation in years. We keep saying we'll go somewhere, but something always comes up. Work, the twins, money. There's always a reason to put it off. Maybe that's something for you to examine, Dr. Kravitz suggested. Why you've been able to prioritize your career and your home but not your own joy and rest. It's different, Madison protested. We have responsibilities. And I didn't. The words came out sharper than I intended. Madison, I raised 2 children alone while working full-time. But I still found ways to have a life outside of being your mother. Not often enough, not as much as I should have, but I tried. You've been using your responsibilities as an excuse to avoid taking care of yourself. And you've been using me as a way to avoid facing the real costs of your choices. Madison flinched, but she didn't argue. Maybe you're right. After that session, something shifted between us again. Madison started paying me back not just in monthly installments but in small gestures that showed she was trying to see me differently. She sent me an article about a watercolor exhibition at a gallery in Manhattan. She asked about my shifts at the hospital. She invited me to lunch, just the 2 of us, and actually asked about my life instead of immediately launching into stories about the twins or her business. It was awkward at first, these attempts at a more balanced relationship. We were both learning how to interact with each other as adults rather than as mother and child locked in an unhealthy dynamic. But slowly, painfully, we were making progress. Then one evening in late June, Madison called me crying. Not the manipulative tears she'd used in the past when she wanted something, but genuine broken sobbing. Mom, I need help. My old instincts kicked in immediately. What's wrong? Are the twins okay? They're fine. It's not them. It's Derek. What about Derek? He's having an affair. I found messages on his phone. He's been seeing someone from his office for the past 6 months. I felt my world tilt sideways. Oh, Madison. I'm so sorry. She sobbed harder. The thing is, I don't even know if I'm sad because I love him, or because my perfect life is falling apart. We've been having problems for over a year. But I just kept pretending everything was fine because admitting it wasn't would mean I'd failed. You haven't failed, I said firmly. Marriages end sometimes. That doesn't mean you failed. But everyone thinks we're perfect. The house, the careers, the beautiful twins. We're supposed to be the success story. Madison, nobody's life is perfect. Everyone's just pretending to varying degrees. Is that what you did with Dad? Pretend? The question caught me off guard. No. Your father and I were genuinely happy. We had problems like every couple, but we loved each other. When he died, I lost my partner, my best friend. That's why I've never dated again. I don't want a relationship unless it feels like what your father and I had. Madison was quiet for a moment. I don't think Derek and I ever had that. I think we looked good together on paper. Same social circle, same ambitions, same lifestyle goals. But I'm not sure we ever really loved each other the way you and Dad loved each other. What are you going to do? I don't know. He wants to try counseling. He says the affair was a mistake, that he'll end it. But Mom, I don't know if I want to try. I don't know if I want to save something that maybe wasn't worth saving in the first place. Then take your time deciding. You don't have to make any choices right now. You can just sit with the uncertainty for a while and see what becomes clear. How do you do that? How do you sit with uncertainty without losing your mind? I laughed softly. Honestly, therapy, painting, and a lot of crying into my pillow. But Madison, I'm learning that uncertainty isn't the enemy. Staying in a situation that's slowly destroying you because you're afraid of uncertainty? That's the real danger. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment thinking about my daughter's marriage. I'd always assumed Madison and Derek were happy. They certainly looked happy in their perfectly staged social media posts and their carefully curated lives. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe Madison had spent so much energy creating the appearance of perfection that she'd never stopped to build something real. 2 days later, Madison showed up at my apartment with the twins. "Can they stay with you for a few hours?" she asked, her eyes red-rimmed behind sunglasses. "Derek and I need to talk, and I don't want them hearing us fight." "Of course," I said, opening the door wider. "But Madison, my rate stands. I'm happy to watch them, but I need you to pay me." She pulled out her wallet without argument and handed me $400. "For hours. Is that enough?" "It's enough." After she left, I spent the afternoon with Olivia and Emma at the playground near my apartment. We fed the ducks in the pond, played on the swings, got ice cream from the vendor cart. They were beautiful, bright children, and I loved them fiercely. But I also recognized something important. I could love them without sacrificing myself. I could be their grandmother without being their full-time caregiver. Love didn't require martyrdom. When Madison returned, she looked exhausted but somehow lighter. "We're separating," she said quietly while the twins played with blocks in my living room. "Derek's moving out next week. We're going to try to keep things amicable for the kids, but the marriage is over." "How do you feel about that?" "Relieved," she admitted. "Terrified but relieved. I think I've been unhappy for a long time, but I was too proud to admit it. Too invested in the image of the perfect life." "Images aren't real," I said gently. "Only people are real. Only feelings are real. You can't live in a photograph, Madison. You can only live in actual moments with actual feelings." She smiled through tears. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just started listening." Over the summer, I watched my daughter begin the difficult work of dismantling her perfect life and building something more authentic. She moved with the twins into a smaller house in a less prestigious neighborhood. She scaled back her business to focus on being present for her children during the divorce. She started seeing her own therapist, separate from our joint sessions with Dr. Kravitz. And slowly, painfully, our relationship began to transform into something neither of us had experienced before. We became two adult women who were related by blood but were learning to relate to each other as people, not just as mother and daughter locked in predetermined roles. Madison continued to pay me when I watched the twins, which was now maybe twice a month instead of 3 times a week. She asked about my life and actually listened to the answers. She came to my watercolor class exhibition in August and bought one of my paintings to hang in her new house. "This one," she said, pointing to a landscape I'd painted of the Brooklyn Bridge at sunset. "It reminds me of you. Strong and beautiful and standing on your own." I cried when she said that. For the first time in our relationship, my daughter was seeing me as I actually was, not as she needed me to be. James and Teresa threw me a bon voyage party the week before my Italy trip. It was small, just family and a few close friends, but it felt significant. James gave a toast to my mother, who taught us that it's never too late to choose yourself. To Caroline Winters, who is finally living the life she deserves. Madison stood up, her wine glass shaking slightly in her hand. "I want to say something too." She looked directly at me. "Mom, I spent most of my life taking from you. Your time, your money, your energy, your dreams. I told myself I deserved it because I was your daughter, because that's what family does. But what I really was doing was stealing pieces of your life because I was too selfish to build my own life properly." She paused, wiping tears from her eyes. "I can't give back all the years I took. I can't undo the damage. But I can promise that I will never take from you like that again. And I can promise that I will teach Olivia and Emma that the women in their lives are whole people with their own dreams and needs, not just resources to be used up. Thank you for finally showing me what it means to respect yourself. I hope someday I'm as brave as you are." The room was quiet. I stood up and walked over to Madison, pulling her into a hug. "It's not about being brave," I whispered. "It's about finally understanding that I matter too." My flight to Italy left on a crisp September morning. James drove me to the airport, refusing to let me take a cab. As I checked my bags and prepared to go through security, he hugged me tight. "Have the time of your life, Mom. Take 1,000,000 pictures. Eat all the pasta. Paint terrible watercolors of Tuscan hillsides. Just be happy." "I'm already happy," I said. "But I'm going to be even happier when I get back with stories to tell." At security, I turned back to wave at James one more time. He was standing there watching me, my baby boy who'd grown into a good man. He blew me a kiss and I caught it, pressing my hand to my heart. As I walked through the terminal toward my gate, I passed families traveling together, couples holding hands, business people rushing to meetings. But I was alone, and for the first time in my life, alone felt exactly right. I found my gate and settled into a chair, pulling out the journal I'd bought specifically for this trip. On the first page I wrote, September 2024. Caroline Winters travels to Italy alone at age 56. The beginning of the rest of her life. My phone buzzed. A text from Madison. Safe travels, Mom. Thank you for teaching me that it's okay to choose yourself. I love you. I typed back quickly before they called my boarding group. I love you too, sweetheart. Take care of yourself and those beautiful girls. I'll be home in 3 weeks with stories and terrible paintings. As I boarded the plane and found my window seat, I felt something I'd been searching for my entire adult life. Not happiness exactly, though I was happy. Not peace, though I was more peaceful than I'd been in years. What I felt was complete. Whole. Like all the scattered pieces of Caroline Winters had finally come together into one person who knew her own worth. The plane lifted off, and I watched New York City disappear beneath the clouds. Somewhere down there, my children were living their lives. My grandchildren were growing up. My small apartment sat empty, waiting for my return. My job at the hospital would still be there in 3 weeks. My watercolor class would continue without me for a few sessions. But right now, none of that mattered. Right now, I was Caroline Winters' solo traveler, heading toward the Italian countryside with nothing but a suitcase full of art supplies and a heart full of possibility. I opened my journal again and began to write. This is what I've learned at 56 years old. Love doesn't require sacrifice. Family doesn't mean surrender. Being a good mother doesn't mean erasing yourself. And it's never ever too late to choose yourself. 3 weeks stretched ahead of me like an open road. 3 weeks of paintings and pasta and wine and wandering through ancient streets. 3 weeks of being nobody's mother, nobody's grandmother, nobody's employee. Just Caroline, discovering who she was when no one needed anything from her. The flight attendant came by with drinks. I ordered a glass of red wine and toasted silently to the woman I'd been and the woman I was becoming. Both versions deserved recognition. Both versions had done the best they could with what they knew at the time. But this version, the one sitting on a plane to Italy with a window seat and a whole life ahead of her, this version knew something the others hadn't. She knew that choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. And sometimes survival looks like saying no to your daughter. Sometimes it looks like charging $100 an hour for childcare. Sometimes it looks like getting on a plane alone and trusting that everything will be okay without you for 3 weeks. I pulled down my window shade as we climbed higher into the sky, blocking out the bright afternoon sun. Then I reclined my seat, closed my eyes and smiled. For the first time in 30 years, I was exactly where I wanted to be, doing exactly what I wanted to do, answerable to no one but myself. The rest of the flight passed in a pleasant blur of meal service and movie watching and dozing. When we landed in Rome 8 hours later, I walked through the airport feeling like I'd shed an old skin somewhere over the Atlantic. The woman who deplaned in Italy was different from the woman who'd boarded in New York. Lighter somehow. More herself. I collected my luggage and made my way to the train station, where I'd catch a regional train to a small town in Tuscany called Montepulciano. I'd rented a small apartment there for the first week, planning to use it as a base for exploring the surrounding countryside and painting the landscapes that had called to me through photographs and travel books for years. The train wound through the Italian countryside as the sun began to set, painting the hills in shades of gold and amber. I pressed my face to the window like a child, not wanting to miss a single moment. This was it. This was the life I'd been too afraid to claim until Madison's demands had finally pushed me to breaking point. Maybe I should thank her, I thought with wry amusement. Maybe forcing me to set boundaries had been the greatest gift she could have given me, even if she'd given it accidentally by trying to take too much. When I finally arrived in Montepulciano, it was dark and the narrow medieval streets were lit by warm streetlights that made everything look like a painting. My apartment was tiny, just a bedroom, a bathroom, and a small kitchen, but it had a balcony that overlooked the Tuscan hills, and that was all I needed. I unpacked my suitcase, laid out my painting supplies, and made myself a simple dinner of bread, cheese, and wine I'd bought from a small shop near the apartment. Then I took my wine glass out onto the balcony and sat in the warm September evening, listening to the sounds of the town settling in for the night. Distant conversations in Italian, the clatter of dishes from nearby restaurants, church bells ringing the hour. This is my life now, I thought. Not forever, but for now. For these 3 precious weeks, this is my life, and I answer to no one but myself. I raised my glass to the Tuscan hills and whispered the words I should have said decades ago. Here's to you, Caroline Winters. Here's to finally putting yourself first. The 3 weeks in Italy changed me in ways I couldn't have predicted. I painted every day, filling sketchbook after sketchbook with terrible watercolors that somehow captured the essence of the Tuscan landscape, even if they didn't capture the technical reality. I ate meals alone in small trattorias, conversing with restaurant owners in broken Italian and enthusiastic hand gestures. I walked through vineyards and olive groves, my fingers stained with paint and my heart lighter than it had been in decades. On my last night in Montepulciano, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset and realized something profound. I'd spent 3 weeks completely alone, and I hadn't been lonely once. Solitude and loneliness weren't the same thing. Loneliness was what I'd felt in my marriage to Richard after he'd retreated into his work, leaving me to raise our children essentially alone while he was still alive. Loneliness was what I'd felt watching Madison's life from the sidelines, invited in only when she needed something from me. But solitude was this. Sitting on a balcony in Italy with a glass of wine and a heart full of contentment, answerable to no one, responsible for no one, free to simply exist as myself. My phone buzzed with a text from Madison. I know you're coming home tomorrow. Can we have dinner this week? Just you and me? I want to hear about your trip. I smiled and typed back. I'd love that. Thursday evening. Her response came immediately. Perfect. My treat. You picked the restaurant. I chose a small Italian place in Brooklyn, amused by the symmetry of eating Italian food to tell stories about Italy. When Thursday arrived, I dressed carefully in a flowing dress I'd bought in Florence, feeling more confident in my own skin than I had in years. Madison was already seated when I arrived, and I barely recognized her. She'd cut her hair short, a practical bob that made her look younger and less polished. She wore jeans and a simple sweater instead of her usual designer outfits. When she stood to hug me, I noticed she wasn't wearing her wedding ring. Mom, you look incredible. Did Italy give you some kind of magical transformation? Maybe it did, I said, settling into my chair. Or maybe I just finally figured out how to be comfortable with myself. Over dinner, I told her about the hill towns and the paintings and the small moments of perfect contentment I'd found in unexpected places. A conversation with an elderly woman selling vegetables at a market. An afternoon spent watching painters work in a piazza. The simple pleasure of eating gelato while wandering through ancient streets with no destination in mind. Madison listened with genuine attention, asking questions and laughing at my stories. Then she said something that surprised me. I'm jealous of you, Mom. Not in a bitter way, but in a way that makes me want to figure out how to have what you have. That sense of being completely okay with yourself, of not needing anyone else's approval or presence to feel whole. You can have it, I said. You just have to be willing to let go of needing your life to look a certain way to other people. She nodded slowly. I'm working on that. The divorce is proceeding. Derek and I are being civil, which is more than I expected. I've scaled my business back significantly because I realized I was building something I didn't even want, just because it looked impressive. And I'm learning to actually parent my daughters instead of outsourcing everything. That must be hard. It's terrifying, she admitted. I don't know what I'm doing half the time. But it's also kind of amazing. Like, I'm actually getting to know Olivia and Emma as people instead of just as problems to be managed. They're funny and weird and so different from each other. I missed all of that when I was so focused on maintaining this perfect life that was actually making me miserable. I'm proud of you, I said, and meant it. It takes courage to dismantle a life that isn't working and build something new. I learned from the best, Madison said softly. You've been doing exactly that for the past 6 months. We talked for 3 hours, and for the first time in our relationship, it felt like a conversation between equals. 2 women who loved each other but were also learning to like each other, to respect each other's autonomy and choices. As we were leaving, Madison handed me an envelope. What's this? I asked. Open it when you get home. Back in my apartment, I opened the envelope to find a check for the full remaining balance of what she owed me. All $56,000 left after 6 months of payments. There was a note attached in Madison's handwriting. Mom, I got a settlement from Derek that was more generous than I expected. This is yours. All of it. Not because I'm trying to buy forgiveness or make everything okay with money, but because you deserve to have this debt cleared. Use it however you want. Travel more. Paint more. Live more. I love you and I'm sorry for everything. Madison. I sat with the check in my hands, feeling emotions I couldn't quite name. This wasn't about the money anymore, if it ever had been. This was about Madison finally understanding what she'd taken and choosing to give it back. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. I deposited the check the next morning and immediately booked another trip. This time to Greece for a month in the spring. Then I set up a college fund for Olivia and Emma, because being angry at Madison didn't mean I loved my granddaughters any less. The remaining money went into savings, a cushion that meant I could work at the hospital because I wanted to, not because I had to. Work had become a joy again. I'd been promoted to charge nurse in pediatrics, a role that gave me more responsibility and more purpose. My coworkers had become my community, people who valued my experience and expertise, who saw me as competent and capable and essential. The watercolor class continued, and Bernard had started featuring my paintings in student exhibitions. They weren't masterpieces, but they were mine. Honest expressions of how I saw the world, and that mattered more than technical perfection. James and I had dinner every Sunday, a tradition we'd started after I returned from Italy. Sometimes Teresa and Marcus joined us, sometimes it was just the two of us. But those Sunday dinners became the anchor of my week, reminding me that I had a child who. Madison and I saw each other less frequently now, maybe twice a month, but the quality of our relationship had improved exponentially. She'd bring the twins for afternoon visits, always paying me if she needed childcare, always respecting my time and boundaries. We'd have dinners where we talked about real things, her struggles with single motherhood, my adventures in dating after I'd reluctantly let Maria set me up with a divorce doctor from the hospital. His name was Robert, and he was kind and funny and completely uninterested in anyone who couldn't stand on their own 2 feet. Which, as it turned out, was exactly what I needed. Someone who appreciated my independence instead of trying to diminish it. One Saturday afternoon in November, almost a year after Madison's initial demand for full-time babysitting, I was painting in my apartment when my doorbell rang. It was Madison with the twins, but she looked different. Lighter somehow. "Can we come in?" she asked. "I have something to tell you." Of course. I set down my paintbrush and welcomed them inside. Olivia and Emma immediately ran to my art supplies, which I kept in a low cabinet specifically for their visits. They loved painting almost as much as I did. Madison sat on my couch and took a deep breath. I got offered a job. A really good job with a consulting firm in Manhattan. Great pay, good benefits, reasonable hours. It would mean putting the twins in full-time daycare, which terrifies me, but it also means financial stability and career growth and all the things I've been working toward. "That's wonderful, Madison. Congratulations." She smiled, but there was something uncertain in her expression. "The thing is, part of me wanted to ask if you could watch them instead. To save money on daycare, to keep them with family." All my old instincts kicked in and I started planning how to ask you. "But you didn't." "No, I didn't. Because I realized that would be falling back into our old pattern. Using you as a resource instead of respecting you as a person. So I enrolled them in an excellent daycare near my new office. It's expensive, but it's my responsibility to figure out how to afford it, not yours." I felt tears prickling at my eyes. "Madison, that means more to me than you know." "I know," she said. "Because you taught me. You taught me by setting boundaries that I didn't want to respect but had to. You taught me by choosing yourself even when it made me angry. You taught me that love doesn't mean sacrifice, it means respect." We sat together on my couch while the twins painted at my coffee table, creating masterpieces that would go on my refrigerator alongside the ones I'd painted in Italy. This was family too, I realized. Not the suffocating, demanding kind I'd accepted for so long, but something healthier. Something built on mutual respect and clear boundaries, and the understanding that we were all whole people with our own lives to live. That evening, after Madison and the twins left, I stood on my small balcony looking out at the Brooklyn skyline. The view wasn't as dramatic as the Tuscan hills, but it was mine. This life was mine. Every choice, every boundary, every moment of solitude and every moment of connection. All of it was mine. My phone rang. It was Robert asking if I wanted to get dinner. I smiled and said yes because I wanted to, not because anyone expected it of me or because I felt obligated. Just because I wanted to spend time with someone who made me laugh and saw me as I actually was. As I got ready for dinner, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was 57 years old with gray hair and laugh lines and hands stained with paint. She was imperfect and flawed and still figuring things out. But she was also free in a way she'd never been before. I thought about the woman who'd stood in her kitchen a year ago, reading a text from her daughter demanding free full-time childcare. That woman had been broken and exhausted and so desperate for her daughter's love that she'd been willing to sacrifice everything to get it. But this woman, the one in the mirror right now, she understood something that woman hadn't. You can't earn love by sacrificing yourself. You can only teach people how to use you. Real love, the kind worth having, respects boundaries. It values autonomy. It sees you as a whole person, not just as what you can provide. I grabbed my coat and headed out to meet Robert, ready for whatever this evening might bring. Ready for whatever this life might bring. Because for the first time in decades my life was truly mine. And I was finally ready to live it on my own terms. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.